Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Tuesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Hunter Hodes. For today's episode, we're going to have a full crossover preview with Jon Chik of Locked On New York Rangers, as this is a massive matchup for the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Rangers come into this having won 7 in a row. They are now 1 point ahead of the Penguins for third place in the Metropolitan Division. This division right now, very, very tight. It almost seems like no one wants to lose in the division as of late. So that will be today's episode, and it's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back, Ranger fans and Penguin fans. We got a very special crossover edition for you guys here today. This is Jon Chik with Locked On New York Rangers, joined by my good friend Hunter Hodes from Locked On Penguins. Hunter, both our teams playing quite a bit better lately. How are we feeling? How are we doing today?
Feeling good. The Penguins' 7-game winning streak did come to an end on Sunday. They played a very good Carolina Hurricanes team. It was a 50-50 game, as like the other one was, but the vibes are still very good. They've won 12 of their last 15 games, 7 out of 8. I know they're 1 point behind the Rangers now, but that also comes because the Rangers have been very hot lately too. But it's going to be a sprint all the way to April. But the vibes, compared to where we were, early November, late October, they're much better right now. The team is playing a lot better.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And, sometimes early in the season, a team will scuffle, get off to a little bit of a slow start, and you'll hear things like, well, it's early. And like, yeah, it is. But you know what? This is the Eastern Conference, which is no joke. The Metro is always big time. So, the Rangers, they were losing some games to some bad teams early in the season. And I'm thinking like, man, if this team misses the playoffs or like doesn't get as good of a spot in the playoffs as they would want and has a tough draw in the first round, you're going to look at some of these games as kind of the reason why. So it's nice, I'm sure, for both fan bases that both teams have gotten it together sooner rather than later here. But, Hunter, something I definitely want to talk to you about. I'm sure you've discussed it a lot on your show, and it might be kind of old news for you guys. But for Ranger fans, I'm sure they're interested to get your take on this. Evgeni Malkin, Kris Letang, they were both UFAs going into this offseason. And I remember we talked, last season, and you were pretty confident that they would bring back at least one of the two. But they're both back, both making $6.1 million per season. Just your thoughts on the Penguins getting that done and keeping the band together. And are you happy that they're obviously having good seasons? And Letang had that stroke, which was unfortunate, but Malkin having a very good season. Just your thoughts on that whole situation there.
Yeah, I mean, it was the only sensible move, I thought, for the Penguins at the time. And, it makes a lot of sense right now. Malkin has played virtually every game this season, over a point per game. This was the typical production that, I think a lot of us were expecting. No disrespect to Vince Trocheck, who is on the Rangers, but some Penguins fans were thinking he could replace Malkin. But that's just not realistic because of what Malkin can do in all three zones and on the power play. Letang had a little bit of a slow start to the season, but, honestly, ever since he did have that stroke, which obviously is very scary, and I'm glad that he is okay. He's been playing, I think, some of the finest hockey of his season. His underlying's been a lot better these last 3 to 4 games playing with Marcus Pettersson since coming back. They both have been key cogs for the Penguins this season. Heck, Letang, he's playing already 25, 28 minutes a night, just 2-3 weeks after he suffered the stroke. And that's just typical ho-hum for him. He's a hockey player through and through. He even said to the media after he had the stroke, he said, yeah, it's going to take a lot more than that to get me away from the game. It's like, all right, man, I know what you're saying, but that's definitely it's a health scare, not just for hockey, but for life in general. But I've been very happy with their production. The second line, when it's been healthy, I think has been one of their best lines right outside the Crosby, Gensel, Raquel line with Zucker and Rust. Malkin is really benefited from playing with them this year. And then ever since Brian Dumoulin came off the top pairing, which was a move that needed to happen because Dumoulin has not looked like himself, Pettersson has been really helping him get his game back. And, you've seen that the last 3 to 4 games.
Yeah, and I just want to say, obviously props to Kris Letang for coming back from this as fast as he did. And, all the best to him going forward because he had something similar, I remember, a few years ago. So hopefully everything's okay there. But man, hockey players, they're just a different breed. I mean, I hear stroke and I think potentially that could be it for him. I mean, not just this season, but maybe for good. And like 10 days later, he's back out there on the ice skating with his teammates. So it's great stuff. I just hope that he's okay, obviously going forward. And the other thing I have to ask you about, I mean, Sidney Crosby, I don't even know what to say. I just say the guy's name. And how many more years of this, Hunter? How many more years do I, as a Ranger fan, have to worry about this guy? And, I mean, is he going to slow down just a little bit at some point here, or just going to keep dominating for another decade or so?
Until he stops being Sidney Crosby, I think we just have to expect him to keep dominating like this. I mean, I would have him. I mean, I might be a little biased, but I try to be objective with it. I would have him as a Hart Trophy finalist right now. I don't know if it would be enough to supplant Jason Robertson or maybe Connor McDavid, but I would have Sid right up there with them. He's well over a point per game. As the Penguins have gone this season, he's been right there. He's just been unbelievable in all three zones. Again, well over a point per game. He's been their most consistent player night in and night out. And, he's a big reason why the team went on that 7-game winning streak, why they won 12 of their last 14 games. It all started with a game against Washington, and then it continued, over this last month. And, he's been the main reason for it. He had a little bit of off game against Carolina. I'm not worried about it. Usually he follows, excuse me, those off games with some of his finest of the season. So would not be surprised if he does have a big game on Tuesday against the Rangers. But yeah, John, he's been fantastic this season. This might be one of the best seasons I think I've seen him play for his career. And that's saying a lot because I've seen him play basically every game as a Penguin, and he's gone well over 100 points numerous times in his career. But, he may not hit it this season, but I do think in terms of his consistency night in and night out, this might be one of his most consistent seasons in a while. He's just a treat to watch right now. And, he's the main reason why they're in striking distance to first place with the Metro.
Yeah, it's funny because, obviously as a Ranger fan, I was joking a minute ago and like, when's this guy going to go away or at least slow down a little bit? But honestly, man, like as a Ranger fan, like there's part of me that's glad that he's still there. I mean, I might live to regret these words, but there's part of me that's glad that he's still there. There's part of me that's glad that Malkin and Letang are still there because those guys, I mean, this is such a great rivalry. And all three of those players are just so like firmly entrenched in this rivalry. Like when Crosby finally does retire, whenever that does happen, the rivalry kind of, takes a little bit of a hit, I think, just because he's been such a part of it, all these battles in the regular season, the playoffs, the whole 9 yards. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that, having those three Penguins there kind of enhances this rivalry, even if you're a Ranger fan, just kind of watching it from that angle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really, the rivalry will not be the same once they all retire. It's probably going to take a little bit to get that rivalry back up. And, I would honestly say that for Penguins Flyers, but I don't think that rivalry has been relevant in the last 4 to 5 years. That's just taken a turn for the worse, which is weird to say because, you think the Battle of PA, it would be one of the biggest, but it just hasn't been. But yeah, like the big three, it's always going to be a big rivalry with the Rangers. And I think it's only going to be enhanced now, John, just because of that playoff series from this past year, where I think everyone was ready to rip their heads off each other from both cities on social media. I was, not to talk about that series overall, I was just ready for it to be over after the second game, to be honest, because like the whole back and forth was just so awful. Like, I'm just like, all right, let's, I just want to focus on the hockey aspect because it was a great series overall. And I do think you're going to see that boil over into this game just because of how big it is, this game standings wise.
I think so too. And I'll echo what you said, Hunter, because it was just getting so nasty on social media. Early in that series, some of the things that people were saying to each other, some of the things that I got thrown at me, I'm sure you heard it from some Ranger fans as well.
It was both sides, John. I'll say that.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
It was. I saw some people obviously from the Penn social media community I wasn't thrilled of. Then I also saw some stuff up from New York with all this stuff. So I definitely sympathize with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember we were DMing each other and just saying like, man, this series just needs to end one way or another. Let's just get it done with. Let's get some finality here and let's all move on with our lives kind of thing. So I think if you're listening to this, Ranger fan or Penguin fan, whatever it might be, just try to be nice to each other during this game tonight, on Tuesday night here. Do your best, some lighthearted smack talk. Okay, but let's just keep it clean if we can. And Hunter, we're just kind of scratching the surface here. I figure we'll keep everything rolling in just a second. We'll eventually get to some predictions, some players to watch. But first, I think we got to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On Pittsburgh Penguins is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league. From pro football to college, bowl season, to basketball and hockey, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And Hunter and I would also just like to thank everybody for making Locked On Rangers and Locked On Penguins your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And kind of changing gears here. I mean, we talked about how both teams are hot, coming into this game. Hunter, what's been like the biggest key to the Penguins turning things around? I mean, obviously Crosby going on a heater certainly does not hurt, but just in general, what are the things that the Penguins are starting to do better, through this recent hot run here?
Yeah, during their losing streak, which, 7-gamer, that's the longest under Mike Sullivan ever since he took over as the head coach. They were giving up a goal per game on the penalty kill, and they were just getting bad goaltending. You couple that with the power play being bad, you lose some games that maybe you should have won, but you give up goals when you shouldn't. That's going to kill you. But ever since then, John, penalty kill is back to being a top 5 unit in the league. It's over the last month. They were 25th, 26th in penalty kill percentage. They're now 4th in the league. That's been a huge reason for the turnaround. Tristan Jarry has also been on a heater, 10-0 and 2 in his last 12 starts, 935, 940 save percentage, looking like the goalie that we saw for most of last season. Was a bit weird that he did not get the start on Sunday. They did not have a back-to-back today. So it was just a curious decision from Mike Sullivan to start Casey DeSmith. But I would expect Tristan to start in this game on Tuesday, especially when you look at the standings. Those, I think, are the two main reasons, just because they were playing well at 5v5 already. Their underlyings are very good. It's just they weren't getting the saves, and they were giving up a goal per game on the penalty kill. And then the power play has also really had a big heater. 8 straight games now with a power play goal. That's the longest in the Mike Sullivan tenure. It was tied yesterday and against the Hurricanes, and the power play looked a bit off. Yes, they did score on one of their 5 opportunities. It tied the game in the second period. Overall, though, kind of a meh night for it. I think if they're able to convert on one under those other opportunities, they probably win that game. But I think it's just due to the special teams and the goaltending ironing themselves out, because this team is already really good at 5v5. I mean, John, we saw that in the playoffs last year where I thought the Penguins were the better team at even strength. It's just they got taken to the woodshed in terms of, Louis Domingue and, not playing well as a third string goalie. And I think the Rangers power play catching another heater because they were one of the best units in the league last year, and the Penguins penalty kill couldn't stop them. So I think that's been the main reason. But I'll flip it back to you, John. The Rangers, they also had their struggles. About a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to 32 Thoughts. They were saying, could Gallant be on the hot seat, because some of the Rangers fans were not happy about it. But since then, 7 in a row for them, ever since, fan favorite Jacob Trouba to the city of Pittsburgh threw his helmet to the boards. They've won every game since. So what has been the cause for the Rangers turnaround? Because for a while they're trying to look like, they may not even potentially make the playoffs this year.
I mean, yeah, it's been a little bit of everything, I would say. But I mean, to just start with Gallant, I mean, just for the record, and I talked about this on my show, I was never on board with the idea of making a coaching change. You look what the Rangers did last season. I mean, they make it to the Eastern Conference Final in a season where most people didn't even have them going to the playoffs. Down 3-1 against Pittsburgh, win that series. Down 2-0 against the Canes, win that series. Last year, something that really stood out in the regular season for the Rangers, their longest losing streak of the season all year last year was only 3 games, and that only happened twice the entire season. So pretty remarkable consistency for such a young team. And then, the Rangers get off to a little bit of a slow start this year, and everybody's going after Gallant, and he's not the right coach, and this and that. And the point that I made on my show is I bet a lot of people that, were turning against Gallant probably didn't like David Quinn too much. They probably didn't like AV. Probably got tired of John Tortorella. Probably wanted Tom Rainey fired. So that you get the pattern here. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, I mean, honestly, and people are calling for Barry Trotz. And I'm thinking Barry Trotz is an awesome coach, but his system with the players that the Rangers have, that is not a fit at all. He plays a very defensive style, very low event kind of hockey. You can't take advantage of players like Panarin and Fox and Mika Zibanejad playing that style of hockey. That worked for a while, obviously, with the Caps, also certainly with the Islanders for a couple of seasons there. But to me, it just was never a fit. But as far as, how the Rangers have turned everything around, like I said, it's just a lot of the little things. They're skating a lot better, skating harder, competing harder for 50-50 pucks. For a while during that losing streak there, it looked like everybody was skating in quicksand. And I'm watching this and I'm like, were these guys this slow last year? Did I just overrate everybody's speed? What is it? They're a young team. It's early in the season. Why is this even happening right now? So they've been better, skating wise, much better on special teams as well. That the power play just went through a miserable slump. I think it was like 2 for 25 or something like that. They've gotten that together. Yeah, pretty crazy. Igor Shesterkin is, I wouldn't really say that he slumped, but it's just one of
Got a
those things
down
where
stretch for his standards.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I was going with that. Like, he set the bar so high for himself last season that, all of our expectations are just through the roof. But he's back to playing, Vezina worthy hockey and, just overall playing better in clutch situations. The Rangers were such a good third period team last year. They had been terrible in the third period this year, giving away leads left and right. They've been a lot better in crunch time this year, getting the job done in the third period. And, obviously that's something that's helped them quite a bit during this 7-game winning streak here.
Yeah, no, because it was looking just bleak there for a while, just because of some of the Rangers content creators that I follow. And yeah, I mean, Shesterkin, it's hard to duplicate a 940 save percentage season. I think everyone was thinking like, oh yeah, he's gonna do that again. But it's realistic, I think, for the save percentage to come down, maybe 925, 930. That's just how I think the NHL works. But I think another thing I've been seeing recently, John, as well, it looks like the kids are finally playing like the kids. I wouldn't say, would it be for the first time this season, or maybe I don't know if I would say it like that, but I think, a lot of people around the league have been waiting for them to really just take that next step because, Lafreniere, Kakko, former top 3 overall picks, Lafreniere, number 1 overall pick, Philip Hedl, he's been on a heater as well. What have you seen from them lately that, just ups your confidence? I did see that Hedl got hurt, so I'm not really sure if he's going to be in the lineup on Tuesday.
Yeah, he took a big hit from Lafferty against the Blackhawks. A little bit of a questionable hit. I mean, he's not going to be suspended or fined or anything. I can't go crazy about it. It was one of those things I would have liked to see the Rangers maybe retaliate against him a little bit later in the game. But we'll see if Hedl plays. But, either way, and obviously all the best to him as well, because I don't know. They just say upper body injury. It could be a head injury. Who's to say for sure? But yeah, no, they've been great lately. I mean, obviously, there's been high expectations for guys like Lafreniere and guys like Kakko. They've shown flashes here and there. They played pretty well during the playoff run last year as well. A bit of a slow start this season. What seemed to really get Lafreniere and Kakko going, though, the Rangers, when they're going through that losing streak, they were really juggling the lines and just trying to find anything that would work, as you do when you're really struggling. But they ended up putting Kakko and Lafreniere on the top line with Mika Zibanejad. And I've always felt that Lafreniere and Mika Zibanejad really have good chemistry. I'd like to see a little bit more of them, somewhere down the line here. But that seemed to spark them a little bit. Then they had a quiet game or two, and then they put the kid line back together. Lafreniere, Hedl, Kakko, left to right. And they've been serving as the Rangers' second line. And they've really excelled. They've got about 18 combined points in the last 7 games, something crazy like that. And what that's also allowed the Rangers to do is to spread out the scoring a little bit, because they were kind of a top-heavy lineup. Well, now you got the kid line as the second line. You've got Mika, Panarin, and Goodrow together on the top line, which has really seemed to click. And you've got guys like, Trocheck and Kreider. They're now on the third line, and they're out there with Jimmy Vesey, who's overperformed this season as well. So I think right now they're lining up quite a bit better. And obviously that kid line, I don't know if those guys just kind of feed off each other, if they galvanize each other, or exactly what it is. But there is definitely some chemistry between that trio. And it's been a lot of fun to watch. They scored a highlight reel goal or two against the Blackhawks. I know the Blackhawks not exactly the best team in the league, but, they still look really good there.
Yeah, that game looked like it was a blowout for, I think, most of that game. And that came after, they took down the Flyers 6-3. Obviously scratching Kevin Hayes helps, but, the Flyers, I don't even think that would make a difference, to be honest.
Right? Yeah.
That's a bad team out
Yeah.
there that probably needs to rebuild. But yeah, it's crazy, John, how, both teams seem to just, be on these heaters after some early season struggles. And I think this is going to make for a great game. I do think this is probably going to be one of the better crowds at PPG this season. I know some people have been a bit critical of them just because, there's a lot of empty seats. But I also will say to this, now that I am a full-time resident there, this is a football town for most of this year until the Steelers come to an end, and there's 30-week games left until they're done. And there's also just been a lot of construction around the arena, and then the ticket prices as well for some weekend games especially are a bit through the roof right now. But I do think this is going to be a very raucous crowd, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be intense, man. The playoff series last year and everything even that happened in the regular season, I'm sure the Igor chants will be out in full force and all that good stuff as well. I'm hoping, Ranger fans, and I've noticed this in years past, but I've noticed it this season more than ever. They seem to be everywhere. Like there's certain arenas where they just kind of invade, and you will get some "Let's Go Ranger" chants. They're not that loud because there's only so many fans there, but I'm hoping that Ranger fans will come out and represent the team, and maybe make a little bit of noise and see what they can do. Obviously, have the Rangers back in what's going to be a tough building to play in. I did want to ask you though about you mentioned Kris and Jerry earlier, and I'm sure the rivalry going on here, and we're getting close to the break. I'm sure both teams are going to go with their best goalie. But I noticed he's a UFA after this season, and he's had success as the Penguins goalie. I feel like Penguin fans, and you would know this better than me, but I feel like they've kind of gone back and forth on him a couple of times. Do you feel like he's the guy, that he should be the guy, that this could be a franchise goalie and they got to lock him up and get him under contract going forward?
It's a tough call right now. I mean, he's playing very well. I'll say that again. 10-0 in 2 of his last 12 starts, really putting it all together. He's not top 10 in goals saved above expected yet, but I think he's going to be trending in that direction. He just struggled to open the gate this season, just wasn't himself, but was battling, I think, a small injury, but now I think that he's 100% healthy. He's getting back to, the goalie that we saw last year. And it was a shame that he was not healthy enough for the playoffs, Sean, because I do think he could have made a major impact in that series. Starting your backup to third string goalie is obviously going to change up the game plan a little bit. I think he could have given them a few extra saves, but this last month and a half, he's been great. As for long-term, I know that they want to sign him to an extension. It's just a matter of, where are those talks going to go? Me personally, I've said this on my show, I would still kind of wait. I know the goalie market next year is kind of as a lot of years it is. Good goalies, really good goalies are hard to come by because a lot of them are locked up, but I feel like you can get average goaltending for the most part each offseason by signing a goalie for cheap. But for Tristan, it's all a matter of, can he keep this up? Can he show that he can be the guy for the next 5 to 6 years? What does that cap hit look like? He's probably going to make, a lot more money than, I believe, what is it, $3.75 million per year that he's making right now. He's going to ask for, I would say, 5.5 million, maybe a little more. I just don't know if he's worth that yet, just because, he's been inconsistent at times. But with the way he's playing right now, I would give it to him. I just want to see more of that consistency. Again, he's been playing a lot better as of late. I'm just really curious to see how he does moving forward, especially, as this stretch is really tough for the Penguins. After the Rangers game, they have Carolina, they have the Islanders, they have the Devils, they have the Red Wings. A lot of tough teams coming up here, especially in the Metropolitan Division, where, they really need to, I wouldn't say make up ground, but, get the 2 points and make sure those games don't go to overtime, because then you're just throwing points to other teams.
Yeah, it's a tough call with Jerry, man, because, you could kind of take the leap of faith right now and maybe get him for a little bit less. Obviously he can't talk to any other teams. But then again, if it doesn't work out, then you're kind of, for lack of a better term, stuck with him. Although, he has played pretty well. I feel like I would almost do it, man. I would roll the dice a little bit. I don't know, who you're going to get that's better, unless the Penguins have some prospect that I'm not aware of that's coming up through the system. But that's kind of what the Rangers, it reminds me of the Igor Shesterkin situation. He had not played a lot of games in the NHL, but they locked him up to a 4-year deal at, I think, $5.5 million. I've got cap friendly here, if memory serves me correctly, $5.66 million per season. So that's a steal for him at this point. And I don't know. I mean, if I'm them, I might be a little bit proactive about that, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely make the argument. I just think, it's just tough for me because, like, how do I want to say this? Like, with goalies, it's just I feel like it's almost like the running back position of the NFL. You don't want to invest, super heavily in one unless, like, you have a guy like a Shesterkin, like a Jake Ottinger, like a Andre Vasilevsky, something like that. And I'm just, obviously Tristan's not at that level right now. Could he get there? Maybe, but it just worries me if he takes up a big chunk of that cap space and then, the contract turns into one where it's unmovable. It's not going to be like a Sergei Bobrovsky contract out here that is just a flat out albatross, but it makes me a little bit nervous. But he keeps this up though, I will have no problem giving him that contract.
I hear you, man, for sure. Anybody that you feel like has been kind of like an unsung hero for the Penguins? I mean, we know about Crosby and Malkin and Letang and Gensel and all the usual suspects, but anybody who's really kind of over-delivered for your team this year and maybe has played well during this recent hot stretch?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, starting out defensively, P.O. Joseph, this is his first full season as an NHLer. He's only played before this, well, 5-6 games. And he's been great. He was someone that I didn't expect to make the team out of camp. I thought they were going to put Ty Smith in there and trade him during the preseason. And I know they were trying to trade him during the preseason from what I was told, but I'm glad that the Penguins did not. He has been outstanding in all three zones. We've known that he's been good defensively. It was just getting that offense to really get going. And he got a second career NHL goal just this past Monday against the Dallas Stars. That was the goal that tied it up. And he's just been more involved in the offensive zone as a whole. He's been getting second power play minutes. He's just really, a lot more polished right now as a defenseman. You can really see that his work in the AHL has paid off. And he's been getting bottom pairing minutes just to ease him in. But, I think right now, you got to give him more than that. I would be giving him top 4 minutes every night. If Pettersson somehow struggles up there with Letang, I would maybe even move Joseph up there with him. That pairing, had a couple rough games a couple years ago when the defense was really hurt was really banged up due to injuries and COVID. But lately this has just been a much different player. And I think if it weren't for a couple of other rookies who have been playing well this year, I think P.O. would be getting a little bit more Calder Trophy love. Doesn't have the points for it, but I think defensively, it's kind of like how John Marino was getting some Calder Trophy love a few years ago because of his defensive impacts were so elite. P.O.s aren't as good, but I think they're enough that people should start taking notice about it. Forward-wise, I would say Jason Zucker. He is a bit banged up right now, week to week, though he did practice today. Don't know if he's going to play on Tuesday, but he has 20 points in 27 games. Finally looking like the player that they gave up quite a haul for a few years ago before the COVID shutdown. He's been great on that line with Evgeni Malkin. And I'll also throw Rickard Rakell in there. I wasn't too crazy at the time about his extension, but he's playing top line minutes right now, and he's looking like, how do I want to say this? He's looking like the player that I think they thought they were going to be acquiring from the Ducks, because when he was with Anaheim towards the end, just looked like a shell of his former self, but he's gotten back to his game and then some ever since he became a member of the Penguins. So those three players, I think, right off the top of my head, have been awesome for the Penguins this season. I'll actually throw that back to you, John. Who outside, of the top guys like Zibanejad and Kreider and Panarin, who do you think has, really impressed you this season?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for Rakell, I would imagine probably something that probably helps with him. You go from Anaheim to Pittsburgh, and you go from playing on this, cellar dweller team and just struggling. And now you get to play with Sidney Crosby, almost every night. So that had to be nice for him. As far as the Rangers, a couple of unsung heroes, I would say for sure, Braden Schneider, a young defenseman, made his NHL debut about halfway through last year, ends up getting a bunch of great experience in the playoffs. Just kind of an old school, big, tough, physical defenseman who's adding a little bit of offense to his game. I want to say he's up to like 4 or 5 goals this season. And, we talked about how each of our teams were struggling at the start of the season, right? One of the biggest reasons for the Rangers struggles is the pairing of Trouba and Miller. They were just awful to start the season. And I don't know what the problem was. I've heard Trouba's been playing through some injuries. Miller just seemed to be struggling with some confidence. And so Braden Schneider's emergence, and for a time there, he actually replaced Trouba on the second pairing because that's how bad it got. But his emergence was that much more important by the fact that, Miller and Trouba were struggling so much. So he's been big time. Just seems like a guy that's going to be a really good defenseman in this league. And as far as, a forward, if I want to throw a forward out there, I'll actually say Jimmy Vesey. He had the first tour with the Rangers, spent 3 seasons there, has bounced around the league, hasn't really done a whole lot. They bring him in on a PTO. He was no guarantee to even make the team. He did make the team. He's moved up and down the lineup. He's moved from right wing to left wing. He's killing some penalties, adding some offense to his game as well. But just one of those guys that's a little bit of a pest. And I know Ranger fans, they traded for Tyler Mott at the deadline last season. He moved on to Ottawa this offseason. Jimmy Vesey is kind of playing that role, that guy that's, good on the penalty kill, just a good defensive forward, a little bit gritty, a little bit scrappy. They had a slow start against the Devils a few games ago, and he got into a tussle with somebody. I think it might have been Severson in the corner, just kind of got the team going a little bit. So really like what I'm seeing for him. For a guy on a 1-year deal making the league minimum, I think you have to be pretty good about what Jimmy Vesey is giving you if you're a fan of the New York Rangers. But yeah, man, I figure you want to make some predictions here, and then we can call it a day.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds good with me.
Yeah. So, what do you got, man? Final score? Anybody to score a goal or anything along those lines?
I've been on a hot streak with these predictions. I've been, picking them to win, and they've actually been winning. So I am going to stick with that. I do think the Penguins win a tight one here. Going to go 3-2 at home. I think it's going to be, just a middle of the pack scoring game. The Penguins are I wouldn't say they were frustrated about that loss to the Hurricanes, but I do think they're going to want to come back and try to win this game just because it's so big in the standings and try to leapfrog the Rangers. I think it does end in regulation. I think Gensel gets a huge goal. He was torching the Rangers, I would say, in the playoffs this past May. I think you're going to see him score at least one goal here. And I do think Tristan Jarry starts and has a really good performance. So those are most of my predictions for this one, John. I'll hand the floor over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember last year in the playoffs, man, the Gensel, Crosby, and Russ line just absolutely killed the Rangers. So when I looked at, daily face-off today to see the line combos, just a little thing like seeing Brian Russ not on that line anymore, that was good with me. I mean, obviously, Raquel's done a nice job there too, but man, I still have nightmares about what that line was doing to the Rangers, especially early in that series in the playoffs last year. But yeah, I mean, as far as the final score, I mean, I can't pick against my team having won 7 in a row. I'm going to say 4-3 Rangers in overtime because, with this rivalry and the way everything goes and the competitiveness and just how, evenly matched it seems to be, I just feel like we're going to see a crazy hockey game. And, it's one of those games, even if you're not a fan of Rangers Penguins, you root for some other team, I'm sure you can watch this one and be fully entertained by whatever's going to happen. So I'll say 4-3 Rangers in overtime. And I'll say Adam Fox for the game winner in the overtime period.
Okay, it doesn't help the other Metro teams that the game goes to overtime just because there's the loser point is involved. But would not be surprised if this does go to OT. And as you said, Fox gets the game winner. He had a really good series against the Penguins in the playoffs, and he's definitely always on high alert when it comes to the Penguins and shutting down top players.
Yeah, for sure, man. So, yeah, man, I figured we could call it there. But, Ranger fans, Penguin fans, thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. And, Hunter, man, anytime you want to do one of these crossovers, it's always a lot of fun. I'm up for it as long as you are.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, they have a lot of games coming up against top teams. I think they play the Rangers coming up pretty soon again as well, so we can definitely do something for that, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, Ranger fans, Penguin fans, thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.